Hello, and we're back with Commerce Now 2024. We hope you're enjoying the event so far. For our next session, we welcome Pierre Dubois to the stage. Pierre is the founder and CEO of Zimana, a services firm that helps organizations achieve improvements in marketing, website development, and business operations. Pierre has conducted numerous digital marketing and analytics workshops across the US, including sessions for the City of Chicago, General Assembly, DX Summit, and Content Marketing World. Pierre is also a prolific writer, contributor to CMS Wire, DM News, and Information Week, and serves as an associate editor for Small Business Trends. Pierre is also a co-author of two books, The Entrepreneur Within and Faith, Failure, and Success. In this session, Pierre will provide an overview of data strategies that tell a story behind the data used for managing customer experiences and customer retention. I'm eager to learn more about this. Welcome to the stage, Pierre.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here, and I am very, very excited to give this presentation to you. And I apologize a little bit. I had to also change my venues for Wi-Fi in, so forgive the headphones. It will help me hear everyone else much, much better. As mentioned, I am an analytics expert, and I'm going to try to see if I can get our slides going here in a minute. Let's see if I can get this onto the play, and hopefully everyone can see my slides here. Um, so I'll talk to this a little bit. So just to explain, I have been in analytics now for about 15 years, which I'm still scratching my head as little hair as I have on it. My prior experience before that, I was an automotive engineer. And as mentioned before, I've been a columnist for a number of years. People have come to ask me to write about analytics. And I'm currently also teaching as an adjunct at Trine University. So what I want to take you through today is I call this Commerce Analytics Gems. And the reason why is because there's a lot that's going on right now with commerce, which is driving analytics. And to be honest with you, almost to the point where it was kind of almost unfair to even try to put this in a simple presentation. But what I wanted to do is cover some high-level basics, going from basic reporting that you would see in analytics, like you would in Google Analytics, for example. So we'll talk about a couple of things there. We're going to talk a little bit about churn analysis and why that's important, particularly now because of what's happening with the commerce trends. And then I'm going to talk at a high level about AI and where AI might be able to assist you in making your work a little bit more efficient, a little bit getting things done a little bit faster. So let's talk first about what's been happening. E-commerce has been, it's kind of a funny phrase to me because that's been around for a while. But it's been a very slow growing development online. Most people, when they first envisioned having a website, imagined having some sort of commerce going on, basically. That led to the idea of Amazon and of course, Amazon's great history. But what's happened in the last, particularly in the last 4 years after COVID, is that there is more of this platform. Um, Platforms are pretty much central to operations now. People see it as more than just having a website or an app, but it's the operations that are triggered from any activity off those websites and apps. So it's very important not only for you see it with retailers, but also for direct to consumer brands as well. Amazon, which I mentioned a little bit before, the Amazon effect has changed where really our searches online are initiated. We're used to thinking of it as just only within Google, just only within a search engine, but people are starting to search, a certain percentage of people now search starting not just at Amazon, but at other platforms. And that's kind of led into where we are with AI digging into search. And then finally, the trend that's been emerging more and more is social media commerce. And there was a time, probably, I would say almost 20 years ago, that wasn't really, I wouldn't say 20, maybe 15 years ago, that wasn't, social media commerce was expected, but most people were not really accustomed to purchasing within their social media platforms. Today, there's much more of a push with platforms not only encouraging influencers, but coming up with features where people can purchase while within their TikTok experience, while within their YouTube experience, Instagram and threads and so forth. So all of this means we need to gain some insights from analytics. And it starts with a little bit of homework on a web page or an app these days. Um, so analytics is the starting point. And what you want to do is to use that analytics data not just to confirm where people are, but use the data as sort of a guidance of where you want to apply your resources. Back in 2009, like I mentioned before, we're going to have a few resources in place, but fast forward to 2024, as you can imagine, we're way beyond SEO and paid search, and even beyond social media, with things ranging from offline like billboards and flyers to QR codes that had come back in style after COVID. So what you want to do in your analytics, whether it's a Google Analytics, whether it's Adobe Analytics, or any sort of Matemo, which is used to be Pewick, you want to start with a basic reporting that talks about maybe regions where you're operating, um, ad campaigns that you're operating on whether search or social media, because you can always tag those links, and then comparing the time periods between campaigns. These three attributes into your reporting can help you organize your initial reporting exploration. A lot of times there's just a lot of reports in the analytics solution, and your job is really trying to narrow down to the very basics at first. So gaining those very basics can be a good starting point. And then the next step is to start looking at the e-commerce reports. And I won't go through every report in Google Analytics, but there are a couple that you can do through explorations, which I'll get to in a moment. You want to look at things like a checkout funnel performance, giving you an idea of where people may be dropping out of e-commerce. And again, using things like dates, going from one date to another, maybe one date that may be the start of a campaign to the end date of a campaign, and using that to kind of get a sense of are people are checking out during that time. And then a new feature that's been added over the last couple of years, at least with GA4, has been promotion performance, getting a sense of campaigns during a particular period if people are dropping out. Now, another gem, I don't know if most people understand this at all, but I'll try to get through it pretty deep, very simply, is that in Google Analytics, you have what's called explorations. And most analytics platforms have some variation of this, but I think Google has the most interesting one. Over the years, there was such a Google had analytics that had switched over from more than websites to websites and apps. And because of that, there was a need to kind of have some sort of reporting flow where it was easier to kind of make custom reports and have some distinct reports put together. So Google came up with explorations. And so what it is that it allows you to select your dimensions and metrics, then set up within a tab that contains the type of visualizations that you want, a bar graph, a line graph, maybe even a geomap. Um, and then the expiration is the result of those two combinations, basically. It appears on a separate tab. Um, the convenience of this is that the arrangement allows you to have tabs side by side, and you can do a number of analysis, such as selecting a path flow, a funnel analysis, and there's also templates as well that can help you, and that can help you not only with custom reports, but even with some sort of ad hoc reporting as well too. Now, one of those ad hoc reports that you may have heard of before is cohort analysis, and it's one of those things that I think is probably growing in importance as e-commerce and as businesses try to have some sort of platform for the customers to provide a customer experience. What a cohort allows you to do is to identify by time and a date a certain level of activity. When a certain group of people enter at a certain time, made a certain activity, and then left out. So it helps narrow it down, basically. The analysis is very, very useful, but when Google Analytics, there is a minor hiccup in that there's a limit. You can have 60 cohorts, which displays the top 15 dimensions. So if you have a number of dimensions that you want in terms of campaign, in terms of other things that you're trying to make comparisons of, there's some limit in how many that can be displayed. We'll get to how you can work around that through R and Python using outside data models as well. But the point of it is that Google Analytics is designed only within its platform. Now, another choice that you want to keep in mind is one called user lifetime. And this one gets into what's called lifetime behavior. You want to monitor and measure if customers are becoming a lifetime customer, if your branding is successful. And this is it's within the Explore, in under explorations, under Explore template gallery, and then it's actually a template. Now, this is designed for a specific set of users that has been active since August 15th, 2020. Um, which is pretty interesting. I'm not sure why that date's there, but we'll roll with that. That's what I got from Google. But it's a so if you have somebody that has been a customer, let's say from December 1st, 2019 to August 1st, 2020, they will not be. That's not something you can be able to analyze within there. But what you can do with customers since that date is you can show initial interactions with things on your website or your app. You can show the most recent actions and do some predictive. You can also have predictive metrics, which is a feature within Google Analytics to um, have a predictive feature based off of its own analytics metrics. Just like everything else, you can adjust the date range. And you can have a tag, a user ID, if you expect customers to move between website and mobile device. That tag can help you create a cohort to help you measure between those two and help you for reporting the long-time visitors or uh, long-term value customers. So with all this said, Google Analytics is a great tool. Most of your basic analytic tools have really come into play over the last few years of making improvements, but there still may be some features that you may want to export in for advanced analysis. And so the question that you may be asking yourself is, when would I ever do this for my own analysis purposes? Well, we'll talk about churn. That's one terrific example. But there's a lot of instances where you might want to add a statistical model to get the most out of your data. And you would do that using what's called an IDE. This is an independent developer environment. And you may have heard this before, like Visual Studio Code. You just may not have heard it referenced as an IDE. IDE is just a class of software, just like you have for spreadsheets. The one that I typically use is a free one called RStudio. It was normally used for R programming, but over the last few years, its host company Posit developed features that will allow you to run Python as well. There, I think, SQL if I remember correctly, but most people are learning how to use R and Python. R and Python are the two main data modeling languages that people use. You'll find many people have used Python if they're familiar with developer programming, and you'll find R is used by a lot of people who have interest in the data, but may not, and may have statistical interest in the data, but aren't necessarily headstrong into the developer framework. A terrific example happened with COVID, where, if I remember correctly, Johns Hopkins used R to analyze which hospitals had to be kept open, how many beds were being taken up by COVID during the pandemic. So it's a very, very popular program, as is Python. So your first step going into this is, and the probably easiest, is importing the data. You can either export it out of Google Analytics, which there's a library for that called Google Analytics R. Libraries are particular programs that you add and download to allow you to run certain functions. And in Python, they're actually called modules. But the point of it is that they both R and Python will allow you to import your data using some libraries. Basically, you can import it and then sort it within a type of object called a data frame. And this is just think of it as just a container to hold your data. The reason you do this is because tools like Google Analytics usually have certain limitations in the number of columns that they can have. They have limitations in terms of how they can visualize those columns. And you may want to have a little bit of freedom in trying to figure out how to model those out to get some extra information. The one thing I would say when you do this, if you're dealing with, it's simple when you do with Excel sheets, CSV sheets. But if you're doing anything with APIs, you may want to look at the documentation and find out if there are query limits. Because if there are query limits, that might make it difficult for you to export certain data if it's done repeatedly. Once or twice should be okay. Several times should be all right. But if you know that you're repeatedly doing this for updating a dashboard repeatedly on a daily basis, that can be a little bit of a complication. But like I said, for a lot of these analysis, it's even a CSV sheet may be fine, just if you're trying to get your feet wet. So once you've imported that data, you now do what's called expiration data analysis, or EDA, and that's kind of a fancy word of data cleaning. What you are doing is you're trying to put the data into a format that your model library will understand, and usually it's in the form of a table. You have observations, which are describing what goes into the rows, variables, which are different items that go into the columns. And that could be things ranging from different features for a product or service to associated information. And then the values, of course, are observations. So what you're trying to do is explore the data to see which observations would be essential for your model. You can range these data as features, meaning that you are maybe adding or taking out variables as needed. And then doing this helps reveal how the data relates to each other, and kind of helps you for things like a regression model, for making a decision tree and so forth. But it kind of helps cleans it up and sorts things for you. Um, Now, let me talk real quickly. There's one piece of this I wanted to get into on commerce, and one of the gems I want to talk about is churn rate, and that's kind of the approach we'll take this to. I mentioned about using R, I mentioned about using EDA, but churn rate is one of those metrics that people are starting to turn to more often, trying to figure out the rate at which purchasing decisions are canceled. Um, so it's a general formula. The number of users at the beginning of the period subtracted by the users at the end of the period divided by the users at the beginning of the period is roughly a churn rate. Um, and there's other examples of how to do this, but that's kind of the basic piece. If you're looking at a period of time when that activity is. If you want to do customer lifetime value, you use churn rate with another metric called average revenue per account. And again, you would look at the average revenue per that period to kind of come up with the ARPA. And then using those together, you would take the inverse of the churn rate multiplied by the ARPA to come up with a customer lifetime value. Now, it sounds like all of this is just about the time in which you are spending with customers, but it's also other factors are important. Service types agreement, the service types that are being serviced to the customer, the demographics, the monthly rates that you charge, customer agreements, all these things play into whether or not customers churn over and over again. But this is a good way of kind of starting to figure out if people are fitting within how those activities fit within a particular time rate. So I won't go into the full formula for this. This is actually, I wanted to give a little bit more of the framework that you need to approach. And I think even if you are just kind of getting your feet wet in marketing, the framework is much more important, because whether you use R or Python, it's the same type of approach. So I mentioned about to actually execute importing the data, and that's data containing your customer information, basically. And then I mentioned about EDA. Which is again exploring the columns in your data, making adjustments. So this, for example, in this example here, this is part of a model that was put together. What you see at the top from lines 1 through 10, or actually 1 through 9, are libraries being brought in. There's a couple for visualization, like core plot, which is used for correlation, ggplot for visualization. But other ones like caret and random forest are helpful for the functions that you need, like GLM, which you see on line 114. That's a regression function, in this case binary, to take that data once it's been explored, and then see if we can put it together in training sets, and then see if we can put it together in some sort of model to see which variable is most influential for churning. I forgot one piece here too. Looking at the data, you are trying to make a decision on which variable you'd like to explore. So that's kind of how this is set up. Um, Now, let me talk about AI for a moment here too. Um, Up till now, we've talked about some steps that are pretty manual, but the new AI platforms, namely ChatGPT in the form of ADA, which is Advanced Data Analysis, and then Gemini Advanced, which is Gemini's version of ChatGPT's ADA, can be helpful for you for exploring some data details and for also debugging as well too. Um, so, for example, on Gemini Advanced, let's say that you want to have some sort of mock version of data available to you. You can actually using natural language create a description of the data that you want to have. Like here, I used I asked it to create a set of products and services sold in a department store, with each column containing product, retail price, and dollars, SKU, and units sold. Something like this can be done using a little bit of prompt engineering, in some cases even chain of thought, which is basically giving a description for the prompt. So that way you have that way the prompt has an idea of where you'd like to go and what you would like to start with. So this prompt could even be refined further with maybe more detail about product, maybe a range of retail prices, and maybe say uh, uh, for units sold, maybe a range of units sold, for example. And you can do this not only in R, but you can also do this for Python. So you can kind of see there's two versions of this. One you see on the top is Python, one below is R. And I mentioned ChatGPT using the ADA version, which is Advanced Data Analysis. That's part of a paid package. So I think ChatGPT Plus. Um, you can actually insert data in as a spreadsheet. And I'll put one asterisk. Believe Gemini, you can do the same thing too. But Chat GTP, I know you can, on the paid version, you can take your spreadsheet, insert it in, and then allow it to see to do the kind of do the EDA based off of query. So you can ask it something along the lines of uh, identify the number of missing values, or identify do the correlation. Are there any variables that correlate between each other before I run a regression? Doing that can help you debug some pieces of data, even debug your code if you like. And like I said earlier, using the prompt engineering to describe your task. But the key to this is, again, being very descriptive. So once you've done your uh, exploration. Once you've done your code, you can now run a decision tree for churn in particular. A decision tree, it looks like the drawing that you see here on the right, basically shows branches, kind of almost like just like our NBA finals of sorts without the basketball, unfortunately. But you have these sort of branches, and each one is based off of probabilities that are the likelihood of making one decision versus the other. And this is important because you use this to help you understand what type of churning capability is possible. So, getting to the summary of this, what with a tree, um, for example, you can look at this and see that con, contact or contract, I should say, um, is the most important variable in for predicting churn. In other words, that all the columns in our data set, we had a column variable called contract, and that's the starting point. And then looking at some of the training data and breaking it down, um, we looked at data for customers who, depending on the length of contract that they have, whether it's a 1 year, 2 year, or if month to month. And one of the things that came out from this is that the 1 to 2 year contract customer was less likely to churn. Now, the way that we know this is that when we look at the trees, we look at the bottom where the squares are, you look at the Y values. The Y values has a decimal, like 0.932 in the fourth cell, 0.87 in the fourth cell, and so forth. That is a percentage. So it's giving you a sense of what is the likelihood um, um, that the given group will not churn if it's very, very high. And then month to month, which is going down the right branch, basically. If you go month to month customers, the ones with the 1 month to 12 month tenure, that's that very right branch, if they're using paperless billing, this is a telecom company, by the way, and they're giving the option of billing to using paperless or not. Month to month, using paperless billing means that they're more likely to churn. So from a business standpoint, that means that we can kind of narrow down to the group of customers that we think we need to service or try to figure out how to make it less likely for them to churn. What is it that would take to take our month-to-month customers, particularly ones who may have chosen paperless billing, to uh, uh, to not leave our brand to kind of maybe do business with us further. So that's the basic piece of this that makes it helpful to you. Now, in general, how do I know if I have a good model? Well, a good model helps you visualize the direction of a solution. It's not going to give you the answer, but it should give you a direction. You saw in the last slide that we got some direction based on our variables, what types of customers and what selection that they have that helped us understand which ones were more likely to churn versus someone else. So it's a differentiation among the model variables reasonably clear. Are there, there's a difference? Are they strongly correlated or are they separately correlated? Understanding that the model data is statistically and technically reliable. That's a big one. And then one thing to keep in mind is that customers who do not fall into your ideal customer profile, um, they will or act in a behavior different from a customer profile will probably fall out, meaning that you probably think of this as sort of a straining or a filtering way of kind of getting down to the right customers and the right customer behavior. That's what your metrics should be helping you to do. And it's something you should be proactive about. The more that you delay, the less likely that you're going to make good decisions that will keep your business moving forward. So summing up, you want to be able to use basic analytics to explore your commerce activity on a website or app. This means using Google Analytics, looking at the basic reporting, as well as maybe some of the advanced reporting as well, some of the cohort that help you get that basic piece of commerce together. Then you want to also think about maybe exporting the data into a data model. That kind of leads into what we were talking about, exporting data using exploratory data analysis, definitely via programming, and in some cases AI to explore the data. And then what you want to do is create a decision tree to note the likelihood of churn. And doing that will help you make some decisions on where you should focus your resources and focus your marketing messaging as well. And with that, I'm going to say thank you. And I'm going to open this up for questions. See if I can.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you so much. That was very informative and insightful. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Uh, the first one is, can you provide some examples of cohort analysis for a B2B SaaS company?
Ooh, good question. Good question. Um, Good question. If I had to think a few things off the bat, something like it could be something based off of software, and you're discovering that the services for that software is being used in a way that's a little bit different. Amazon's kind of a broad example. It's kind of almost like a baseline example. But if you stop and think about it, they started with books. They were a book retailer. Over time, their back end operations got better. Who would have dreamed that a bookstore eventually would have been a real magnet for developers, basically, and being used for machine learning and for AI and even for other products? And part of that, now I'm not suggesting that everyone become the next Steve Jobs, but you should be dedicating some resources for experimentation to understand what your cohort is. But I would look at services in particular because usually your customers use things very differently than what they've done before. I'll give you one more quick example, and this is a little bit more corporate. Ford Motor Company, which is, I remember in the 90s, F Series. If you were a business owner, you bought an F Series. Still one of the top selling trucks to this day. But what Ford was finding out was people were trying to use it as a lifestyle vehicle. Many of these same contractors were purchasing the crew cabs. So that became a extension for Ford. That's what led to, in fact, two times there was a version of Ford F-Series that was a Lincoln. Lincoln Mark LT and then Lincoln Blackwood. And the Blackwood didn't sell very well, but the LT sold a little bit better and actually sold in Mexico long after Ford had to discontinue it. But the point of it is You have to look at the services and you look at customer behavior.
Great, thank you. Another question is, I'm a business person, not a programmer. What what role could I hire for, or could I outsource this data analyst? So I think the person's asking, like, if you had to post a job description, what would you call that role in the company that you're describing here?
I would say somebody who's a data analyst or a data engineer. And I'll tell you why. Most of the exploration, and I apologize a little bit because I know in my presentation I kind of gave a very high level view of what exploratory data analysis is, but the choices in there really is about familiarity with the data. So if I am, let's say if I am a starting a new company for chargers for electric vehicles, there's maybe some data, customer data I have in terms of I'm not talking about just at like PII, but more along the lines of when do customers are charging, maybe initiating a charge, or what services that they're purchasing from my charging. Maybe there's a plus and a premium that I offer. Those sort of things, you need to have some domain knowledge to put that together. And data analyst or data engineer can kind of help you with that. um, at the same time, when you get to R in terms of the modeling and stuff and everything else, they will have a lot of, there's a lot of great online resources, and they can kind of help put that together while you as a business owner are working on other parts within the business. Most people who run with technology, they understand that it's very elaborate. I always tell people it's not hard, it's just elaborate. So as the business owner, you decide a little bit in terms of specifically what help you need in pulling it together. And I think if you draw that line between domain information and technology, using data engineers, data analysts, you will find the right people, basically.
Great. Okay. So if they're looking to hire someone, it's going to be a data analyst or data engineer. Got it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Another question about budgets. How should teams plan for analytics budgets given economic concerns?
Ooh, that's a good one. I know this year's been a lot harder than everything else because of technology and shifts and everything else. The good news is a lot of these tools like R and Python and the libraries are free. That you literally can craft and build your own, not only your model but also visualization tools. There's one called Shiny, which is an app um, that can be used, that can run R and Python. You host it on the cloud so that way other teammates can kind of see updates of data or results that you want them to see, or visualizations. So I would say there's a lot of good open source that helps. If I was spending $1, the biggest thing is training. I think is a big deal. There's still a gap, unfortunately, between the number of data analysts that are out there and understanding some of the statistics, and not so much statistics, but also maybe some of the programming to some degree. Um, if you think that you want someone for the long haul, let's say longer than 2 or 3 months, you definitely, I would say, some mix of training in there would be helpful. If you have a team of people, some mix of training would definitely be, I would say, would be required. I would look at it as the same investment as what 3M has done and Google has done. Those companies, those two companies in particular, they always dedicate 20% of their time towards innovation. So you need to look at your budget and say, what can I do within 20%? And look at things in terms of training and bringing people on board. And you want people to follow your story. That's the big key to get value. If you ask analysts to just, there's such a thing as probably getting too much in the weeds, but you want people to kind of follow your product or service in terms of the story to help come up with answers and ideas that will benefit your business. And that will be the ROI that you get from your investment in the training.
Got it. Thank you so much. Last question here. How do I know that my data is statistically relevant?
Ooh, okay. Okay, that is a good question.
I think you had a comment about having statistically significant data there. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
how
yeah.
do I know that? Yeah.
The biggest piece of this is when you do a regression, okay, there's a step about correlation. You have a table of variables, and what you're trying to do is figure out if maybe one or two variables are very closely correlated. Having them closely correlated means that you could probably do principal component analysis, which means literally having a proxy variable represent those two variables. So it's a little bit that statistic principle in there. Most of these data trees I showed you about, and uh, there was one called Random Forest I didn't get quite into, but a lot of that is built off of regressions. And so you're looking at data and trying to figure out if there's a correlation in there. The second part I would also say, and this may be a little bit more basic, is that when you do EDA, one of the things you're looking at is, are there columns with missing variables? I mean, missing observations. And those missing observations can come from a number of things. It could be legitimately from a survey where customers didn't know how to answer, but it might be from a sensor issue if it's sensor data. If you ever looked at sensor data, you can see that sometimes sensors might have a glitch and they send these NAs. Having that cleaned up is also very, very important because then you can kind of get a sense of how much data you have. Do you have enough data to kind of make a good statistical model? Or if you really are running into big problems, like I said, I mentioned about survey. If you haven't surveyed that many people, that can be a statistical problem. But I would say use classic statistics and keep in mind that there's a lot of resources online that can help you. If you're into R programming, there's a ton of them. And so I always tell people use that as a baseline to help form some ideas a little bit. But definitely give yourself room to explore. This is not something that you're going to answer overnight. You need to have, like I mentioned before, familiarity with the product or products and services. And you need someone you need to give them that time, that 20% to really dig in and start exploring. Even if you don't know the answer, if you're a manager and don't know the answer off the bat, that's okay. Let people explore. That's what analysis is about.
Well, thank you so much, Pierre. I really appreciate the deep dive into data analysis and can tell we're just scratching the surface of your knowledge here. So appreciate all your expertise.
Thank you.
Let's take a
It
short
was a lot of
break.
fun to do it.
Yes, thank you. We'll take a short break now. Stay with us. We have 3 more exciting sessions coming right up.